Happy Friday, everyone. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Exports continue to rise, driving up growth on its way, but slow wage growth, high unemployment, and dampened consumption are still weighing on the Korean economy. As President Moon Jae-in plans to hike minimum wages, the burden on small companies are getting heavier that are already struggling to survive. These stories and more coming right up. But first, the National Assembly's Finance Committee has adopted a confirmation hearing report for Finance Minister nominee Kim Dong-yeon, giving the third green light for President Moon Jae-in's picks for top government posts. As ministerial posts do not require a full floor vote, Kim becomes the first finance chief handpicked by President Moon, with Kim also doubling as the Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs. This was widely expected, as Kim faced no major opposition during his hearing. He fielded questions mainly about policy issues during his confirmation hearing on Wednesday. Kim is expected to officially assume his post on Monday. However, rival parties have failed to reach an agreement over the adoption of a hearing report for Kim Sang-jo, who was tapped to head the nation's Fair Trade Commission. The National Policy Committee that's in charge of his hearing will convene a meeting next Monday to discuss the matter. So a new finance minister will be leading the country's economic team soon. But what challenges lie ahead? Our Shin Se-min tells us more.
Korea's newly appointed Deputy Prime Minister cum Finance Minister is Kim Dong-yeon. Now approved by Parliament, Kim will take the helm as the top economic policymaker as early as this coming Monday. As a seasoned economist, Kim had spent his time drawing up fiscal policies and budget planning at the current finance ministry and served as the Minister of Policy Coordination under the Prime Minister's office in 2013. Kim will now lead President Moon's economic team, already facing a number of major economic tasks. First, the country's household debt balance rose by over $15 billion in the first 3 months this year, while the key rate is at an all-time low of 1.25%. The ratio of the middle class has fallen slightly last year to 65.7%, a sign of widening income inequality. Korea's job market is strained, with the unemployment rate hitting a 17-year high in April at 4.2%. These are just a few of the tasks already piled up for the incoming head of the economic team. Kim has pushed for innovation-driven growth policies rather than the president's income-led growth policy, a slight difference between the two, but something experts see as a positive.
Income-driven growth alone cannot help grow the country's domestic economy, but that could be improved with more innovative growth policies focused on elements like the fourth industrial revolution or technological innovation. It will create a good synergy effect.
Pushing for the new administration's economic policies while addressing impending problems will be a difficult balancing job for the new finance minister, a task many hope will help breathe new life into the economy. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
Korea's economic growth has long depended on its exports, and that has certainly been the case in recent months, thanks to booming demand for key industrial products. However, experts say in order for Korea to see more sustainable growth, the country needs to straighten out various domestic vulnerabilities. Oh Soo-young reports.
Exports were as ever the key driver of Korea's economy in recent months. The Finance Ministry's monthly economic review indicates that outbound shipments of semiconductors, steel and displays drove up the trade surplus, while improving employment figures in manufacturing and boosting foreign investment in major tech companies. With growing demand for semiconductors and a positive outlook in global trade this year, most market watchers believe the economy is on the up, with the possibility of beating the central bank's growth projection of 2.6%.
The strong growth of 1.1% we saw in the first quarter is likely hard to sustain due to various global uncertainties like America's protectionist stance on trade and a hike in its interest rates. Still, the economy could grow at a rate close to 3% this year.
For now, exports are keeping the wheels of the economy turning. But experts say to make the growth sustainable and build resilience, various structural problems must be tackled at home. Financial instability for the average household has put a damper on consumption, which grew at a sluggish rate of 0.4% in the first quarter. Corporations take up about a quarter of the gross national income, the highest level among OECD countries. And latest government figures show wages have not kept pace with the growth of the economy for the last 16 years. The unemployment rate, particularly for the youth, reached record-hitting figures in April, and household debt has long topped the $1 trillion mark. Pointing to these factors, the OECD's biannual report released this week expressed support for a supplementary budget to improve income stability and livelihoods for the average citizen.
The government's $9.8 billion budget supplement, if passed, could add 0.2 to 0.4 percentage point to GDP growth rate this year and the first half of 2018. While it could create jobs in the short run, government policies and corporate reforms must be enforced to ensure a boost in income translates into higher consumption and business investment.
Experts also say the burden of repaying household debt must be eased by keeping the interest rate low for the time being, as well as tightening up various housing loan policies that were loosened in the past. Oh Soo-young, Business Daily.
Now, although the Korean economy is on the up, the finance ministry says it's not entirely convinced that the local economy is on a solid recovery path. In a report released on Friday, the ministry says the uptick in growth in April and May is largely due to external factors, such as rising semiconductor exports and the global economic recovery, rather than the local economy itself. It points to sluggish domestic consumption and high unemployment, particularly the youth unemployment rate, which hovers at over 11%. Despite a number of negative factors, the Korean equity market finished strong this week, as both the Kospi and the Kosdaq marked new records. To give us a wrap up of this week's stock market action, we're now joined by our markets contributor Choi Jin-seok. Hello, Jin-seok.
Great to be here.
All right, so how are things looking on the last day of trading?
Both the Kospi and the Kosdaq market rose by a relatively large margin to break new records. The Kospi surged by 0.77% to close at yet another record high of 2381.69, while the Kosdaq edged up by 0.62% to close at 674. Despite the futures and options expiration date, the Kospi market rebounded for the first time in 3 sessions yesterday, while the Kosdaq recorded the highest in 2017 for 7 consecutive sessions. This positive momentum continued during today's session in both markets. The Kospi opened the session with a slight uptick, once rising to as high as 2385, which is a new intraday high. Institutions once bought shares for the first time in 6 sessions during today's session, and foreigners shifted their position from selling to buying shares during this session. Blue chip stocks led the way in the rally, while Samsung Electronics, the largest stock by market cap, rose sharply for the first time in 4 sessions. Naver, which recently became the 4th largest stock on the Kospi, surged by more than 7% to break its 52-week high as well.
Now, the results of global events mostly turned out to be negative overnight, but the Korean equity market seemed to be not quite affected by this and didn't lose its positive momentum. Why so?
That's right. First of all, market participants and investors thought the results of former FBI Director James Comey's Senate hearing on the investigation into alleged Russian interference in the U.S. elections mostly met expectations. Moreover, global investors do not seem to think these events will threaten the rally, which has been driven by President Donald Trump's promises of tax cuts, infrastructure spending, and deregulation. The tech-heavy Nasdaq market closed at a record level, proving this positive reaction. In Europe, the UK general election exit polls suggested no conservative majority, raising political uncertainty throughout the region. However, investors seem to focus more on the European Central Bank's decision to leave interest rates unchanged, suggesting some confidence in the Eurozone's economic recovery. These are the main reasons why global markets shrugged off negative market factors overnight and during today's session.
Then how is the overall weekly performance of the Korean market? I mean, the Kosdaq continued to outperform the Kospi.
Right. On a weekly basis, the Kospi was mostly flat, while rising by a relatively small margin, while the Kosdaq surged by around 2%. Including today's session, the Kosdaq has broken its 2017 high for 8 consecutive sessions. Although foreign investors continue to buy shares on the Kospi, institutions have sold large amounts of shares on a weekly basis. Excluding today's session, the Kospi has suffered losses of about 0.3% as well. By sector, display, software, and pharmaceuticals and biotechnology performed strongly, while energy, construction, and consumer staples performed relatively weakly. The biosector on the Kosdaq continued to lead the way in recent gains.
Now, moving on to broader Asian equity markets, the Chinese equity market performed quite well despite mixed economic indicators.
Although the Shanghai market was mostly flat during today's session, the composite index surged by more than 1% on a weekly basis. Clearly, there was a mixed picture in economic conditions, particularly in the country's manufacturing sector. However, investors reacted positively to economic data, including May's foreign reserves, which hit a 7-month high, and robust trade figures. More importantly, expectations for the inclusion of A shares in the MSCI index gave a boost to the market. Morgan Stanley Capital International will make the final decision on June 20. Liquidity injection by the People's Bank of China, or the PBOC, also helped lift sentiment.
Then how was the weekly performance in the Japanese equity market?
In May, the Japanese market performed strongly, while the Chinese market underperformed other global markets. However, the overall picture this week was the opposite. Although the Nikkei 225 rebounded during today's session following other global markets, the index plummeted by around 1% on a weekly basis. Uncertainty surrounding the Comey testimony, terror attacks ahead of the UK election, and sluggish employment numbers from the US all served as negative market factors, raising appetite for safe assets. Therefore, the yen value has appreciated throughout the week, spooking the sentiment in the equity market as well.
All right, thank you so much for the wrap-up today.
Thank you.
Korea's oldest commercial nuclear reactor will be permanently halted effective June 18th, a move approved at the 70th Nuclear Safety Commission on this Friday. The 40-year-old Kori 1 reactor began operations in June of 1977 and had its 30-year lifespan extended by 10 years in 2005. With a capacity of 587 megawatts, it provided 4.7% of Korea's nuclear power as of last year. While the state operator initially intended to apply for another lifespan extension, it submitted last year's application to suspend reactor operations following intense pushback from environmental groups and local residents. The Safety Commission will review plans for decommissioning the nuclear reactor and dismantle the facility within 5 years after operations are halted. Korean companies making ships, planes, and trains shed the biggest portion of their employees on record last month. According to the Labor Ministry, the number of people subscribed to national employment insurance in those industries dropped by 22.2% in May from a year earlier. Especially hard hit was the southeastern Gyeongsangnam-do province, home to the shipbuilding industry currently undergoing a restructuring drive. But overall, employment roles appear to have increased, with employment insurance subscriptions rising by 2.6%. Sectors with an increase in workers included food, machines, and automobiles. Steps are being taken to raise the country's hourly minimum wage, but the increased wage burden may prove unbearable for many small companies that have been struggling to stay afloat. Our Lee Ju-young has the story.
It's lunchtime, and restaurant owner Kim Young-ran is busy in the kitchen serving customers. This as Kim had to let go of one of her employees after a recent sharp drop in sales. The initial purpose was to save labor costs, but President Moon's plans to hike minimum wages now has her even more worried.
We would love to pay people more, but labor is the biggest cost factor in running a restaurant. This is a big burden.
Kim is just one of the 5.5 million self-employed that are facing similar concerns. According to the Minimum Wage Commission, Korea's hourly minimum wage, which is currently pegged at about $6, is set to rise by an annual average of 16% to nearly $9 by 2020. This is projected to make it difficult for self-employed businesses to hire more workers, as the additional costs are estimated to reach a total of $31.9 billion over the coming 3 years.
80% of bakeries have sales of about $270 to $450 a day. That means the owners would have to run the entire shop.
This adds to another major issue of unemployment, given that smaller firms hire nearly 90% of local workers.
A lot of owners either say they'll lay off more people or close shop and go work for somebody else.
As business leaders agree that this fails to reflect reality, calls to implement the plan in incremental steps is gaining stronger ground so as to minimize the burden of SMEs. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Although falling milk consumption has often been attributed to low birth rates, milk use in coffee and desserts has led to a rise in plain milk consumption for the first time in 4 years. Our Elliot Kim has more.
Take a look inside any grocery store, and you'll see dozens of milk options for sale. With the drop in sales over the last few years, milk companies have introduced a plethora of choices, sometimes making it difficult for consumers to decide which product to buy. From 2012 to 2015, plain milk consumption trended downwards, falling from 1.4 million tons in 2012 to 1.34 million in 2015. With milk being consumed in an increasingly diverse fashion, the 2016 total rebounded to 1.38 million tons. Milk companies continue to increase the variety of functional milk products available, and the market for coffee and desserts also keeps growing. Coffee shops have added low-fat and lactose-free milks to broaden consumer options. In fact, at one milk company's coffee shop, ice cream is the flagship product on display.
Not just regular lattes, but condensed milk and tiramisu lattes can also be made with low-fat and lactose-free milks. Many customers buy ice cream as well.
The growing number of B2B transactions between milk suppliers and coffee shops show how the two industries are growing together. Some shops offer a free size upgrade on Mondays because of the resounding response to the milk-based drink.
In the spirit of helping dairy farmers, I prepared a special event. Customers enjoy it, and milk consumption has increased.
As the coffee and dessert markets boom, the dairy industry hopes to break away from lackluster performance and will continue to look for more ways it can grow in the future. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Time now for a look through some important global business news from the week with our Eunice Kim joining us in the studio today. Hello, Eunice.
Hello.
All right, so Thursday was a big day in Europe as well as in the U.S. Now, let's begin with the results of the general elections in the U.K., where preliminary results show that things were not looking very good for U.K. Prime Minister Theresa May.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Prime Minister Theresa May was looking for a mandate, but it looks like she could be walking away with the opposite, as her Conservative Party is poised to lose its parliamentary majority. And many analysts are also asking whether her days as the country's leader could be numbered as well. Take a look.
With a little over a week to plan Brexit talks with Brussels, UK Prime Minister Theresa May's gamble looks to have reaped a nightmarish result. As exit polls indicated that Thursday's general election showed the country could be on its way to a hung parliament, the British pound dropped by nearly 2% against the US dollar as the suggestion injected a sizable amount of uncertainty into the currency and into the inevitable Brexit process. As the ballot counts were announced throughout the night, they supported the exit poll. While Theresa May's Tories still held on to the most number of parliamentary seats, instead of gaining more to firm up a mandate heading into Brexit, it lost its simple majority. The main opposition Labour Party also left surprise, winning more than 24 seats they didn't have before, with 639 of 650 seats declared.
The Prime Minister called the election because she wanted a mandate. Well, the mandate she's got is lost Conservative seats, lost votes, lost support and lost confidence. I would have thought that's enough to go, actually, and make way for a government that will be truly representative of all of the people of this country.
Many analysts are asking whether Prime Minister May will still have her party's support to hold on to her seat of power, given that this second general election in 2 years was one that she called on her own. As the vote tallies were coming in early Friday morning, the embattled UK leader made a plea for stability.
At this time, more than anything else, this country needs a period of stability. And if, as the indications have shown, and if this is correct, that the Conservative Party has won the most seats and probably the most votes, then it will be incumbent on us to ensure that we have that period of stability, and that is exactly what we will do.
Now, what a surprise for the UK.
Huge surprise.
Very big surprise there. But now let's turn to central bank news. The European Central Bank is stepping toward slowing its quantitative easing program, as it did signal that it's going to end further rate hikes.
You're absolutely right, and this, of course, comes as the euro area economy has been logging some of its best performance since the global financial crisis nearly a decade ago. The ECB Governing Council meeting in Estonia on Thursday dropped its guidance that rates could fall further, adding that it expects borrowing costs to remain at present levels.
Based on our regular economic and monetary analysis, we decided to keep the key ECB interest rates unchanged. We expect them to remain at their present levels for an extended period of time and well past the horizon of our net asset purchases.
The European Central Bank noted this does not mean it'll wind down its bond buying program. Purchases will continue until there's improvement in wage increases needed to ensure inflation gets to and remains at the bank's 2% target level. The bank added that it could turn course again should the euro area economy suddenly deteriorate. The move does come as the Eurozone economy in the January through March period logged its best performance since the first quarter of 2015. Data from the EU Statistics Agency put the bloc's annualized Q1 GDP growth at 2.3%, beating expectations and also up from Q4's 2.1%. To compare, the U.S. economy expanded by 1.2% in the same period. And finally, over in Washington, a direct accusation against the Trump administration from former FBI Director James Comey.
And although the law required no reason at all to fire an FBI director, the administration then chose to defame me and, more importantly, the FBI by saying that the organization was in disarray, that it was poorly led, that the workforce had lost confidence in its leader. Those were lies, plain and simple. And I am so sorry that the FBI workforce had to hear them, and I'm so sorry that the American people were told them.
The dismissed FBI director in a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing on Thursday said the U.S. president's lies and defamation of the U.S. intelligence agency are what prompted him to speak up. He declined to label President Trump as seeking to obstruct justice when he asked Comey to drop an FBI investigation tied to former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn under fire for unreported meetings with Russian officials. Comey also said Trump had demanded his loyalty and that the Russians had in fact interfered in last year's U.S. presidential elections. Wall Street did close mostly higher on Thursday as investors sighed relief that Comey's testimony did not hold any bombshells, though the Dow did give up most of its intraday record gains by the end of the trading day.
You know, I was also expecting some bigger things to come out of him, but I guess that was it.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Sure thing.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.